When I see you dancing, I'm like, hola, 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 hola. With your move fancy, make me wanna hola, 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 hola. I got your attention, spending that moolah, 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 moolah. I'm a drop popping, pocket, swola, 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 swola.
You're listening to the Greeks Gridiron, live with Ethan Haristadoulou.
Swola, 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 swola.
All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Greeks Gridiron. I'm Ethan Haristadoulou. Monday, March 22nd, 2021. We are now 7 days since the tampering period started free agency and 5 days removed from the actual start of free agency. A lot has gone on. A lot of players have moved around the league. A lot has changed. There's been some things that have come out throughout the weekend that we're going to be talking about today as well. Some big honestly, the theme for today, or the topic for today, has got to be money. If you're going to talk about anything, there has been money thrown around to players. There are networks throwing money around to the league. It seems like money is kind of the thing going on. And with free agency going on, I mean, it all just kind of makes sense. So as far as topics that we have to talk today, free agency signings, the TV deals that the NFL signed, $100 billion, not even multi-billion, $100 billion worth of money being thrown around from TV networks to air NFL games. Amazon even got into it as well. We'll talk about that. We got some more Russell Wilson and Deshaun Watson conversation. Isaiah Wilson from the Dolphins. We'll get into that a little bit. Some teams getting fined for some things that they broke during the season. FCF Finals was also this past weekend, and some NFL draft news that came out as well. So without further ado, we will jump right into the show. First things first, we'll start with the question of the day. Today's question being, which team do you think has done the best in free agency? There's been a lot of money thrown around. The New England Patriots have been the darlings of free agency, throwing around upwards of almost $140 million to players this past week. They have signed, it seems like, everyone and then some. So a lot of money has been thrown around this past free agency. Some really big moves have been made. Who do you feel has won free agency and has had the best free agency so far? As far as signings that have gone on for this past weekend, a number of people have been picked up, some big names. The wide receiver market seemed to be at almost like a stalemate, what it seemed like for the first few days. Receivers that you would have expected to probably been signed or at least agreed to a deal for on Monday last week didn't end up going until this past weekend, Friday into late Saturday. Giants have acquired former Lions wide receiver Kenny Golladay on a massive 4-year, $72 million deal. I like that for the Giants. I think that's really good for them. They needed a perennial number one wide receiver to really put together a solid group for Daniel Jones to throw to. You know, they have Sterling Shepard. They had, I believe his name's Darius Slayton, if I'm not mistaken, as well, the young guy who put up a fair amount of yards and catches last season, a handful of touchdowns as well. So along with Evan Ingram, and hopefully if Saquon Barkley can come back and be a solid player like he was before he got injured, that basically really rounds out the entire offensive unit around Daniel Jones. The question marks now are just, can they put that defense back together and shore up that offensive line that has been somewhat of a weak point for that team? The Steelers were able to re-sign Juju Smith-Schuster in what was kind of like a surprise for everybody. There's been a lot of drama going on around Smith-Schuster and whether he was actually going to be staying in Pittsburgh. He was coming out himself saying that he wanted to stay in Pittsburgh, but a lot of people seem to believe that he was just saying that to kind of save face. But in reality, it seemed like he really did want to stay in Pittsburgh. He took a 1-year, $9 million deal guaranteed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. However, it wasn't actually the most money he was offered. The Ravens were offering more, which is funny. You could Marlon Humphreys, the cornerback for the Ravens, was actually seen. He was tweeting at Smith-Schuster. You know, he wanted him to come in and he wanted to be able to pitch to him and bring him into the organization, bring him over to the dark side, so to speak. But surprisingly enough, Smith-Schuster staying at least for one more year in Pittsburgh. There are some people that are saying that the idea is maybe he's just trying to take this money now and re-up next year when the salary cap shoots shoots back up, especially after these massive TV deals that just got signed for the NFL, which would make sense, take an almost $10 million deal and then just flip next year. Hopefully you play really well, put up another 100 catches like Smith-Schuster did last year, and then be able to really cash in when teams are looking to really spend some money next offseason. The Broncos were able to sign former All-Pro cornerback Kyle Fuller, so at this point they have really put together a solid unit in the defensive backfield. They're keeping Von Miller as well, so they're not only keeping their defense intact, but adding even more pieces to kind of go back to like that 2015 year where they were really building a very solid defense. Now they just got to figure out that quarterback position. I don't think Drew Lock is the answer there. I was actually really high on Drew Lock the last few years. I really thought he would be a good quarterback for them, but it just doesn't seem like he is their guy. Maybe he proves everyone wrong this season, but the Broncos have been in on the quarterback situation, going after players like Deshaun Watson. Obviously that whole situation with the Texans still a mess, but so the Broncos have been rumored for a quarterback. They need to get after one. They also were able to sign Justin Simmons, their safety, to an extended 4-year deal worth up to $61 million. So good for him, good for the organization to keep that unit together. Like I was saying, they initially franchise tagged him. He was the first player franchise tagged this year, or this offseason rather, and now he's actually going to be locked up for at least another handful of seasons with the Broncos. The Rams were able to pick up Deshaun Jackson on a 1-year deal. Big for the Rams because they need kind of that deep threat, that blow off the top type of defense threat. So good signing for them. Deshaun Jackson, obviously in the later part of his years, but he still brings that speed, and he has the most 60 plus yard touchdowns in NFL history. So he's always going to be considered a threat. He might not have the speed he had, maybe 10 years ago when he first broke into the league, but he still has that speed. He can still keep a defense honest and keep them backpedal just a little bit more than maybe a normal defense would be without having Deshaun Jackson on the field. The Cowboys were able to bring in former safety who has now been turned to weak side linebacker Keanu Neal on a 1-year, $5 million deal. Seahawks keep their running back Chris Carson on a 2-year, $14.6 deal to lock him up. Carson's been a really solid running back for the team. I think this is a smart move for the Seahawks. Keep somebody who's a proven runner and has produced in your offense. No reason to really let him go or let him move on to another team. So solid signing for him. The Colts were able to keep Marlon back. He's coming off an Achilles tear. Hopefully he can come back and return to form and just add to the depth in that backfield behind Jonathan Taylor and Nyheim Hines. The Bengals, this is a big one for me. I talked about the Bengals last week on Thursday about how I liked a lot of the signings that they were doing, and now bringing in and addressing the one issue I said that they had to focus on, offensive tackle Riley Reiff from the Vikings. They brought him in on it's essentially a 1-year, $7.5 million deal, but it's a 2-year with a voidable second year that is going to be gone 5 days after the Super Bowl this season. So it's technically just a 1-year deal worth $7.5 million. The Jets continuing to work on building a strong team under Robert Saleh. They got defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins on a 2-year, $17 million deal. And then not too long ago, the Raiders, who pretty much gave away 3 different linemen on their team not too long ago, now bring in Andre James on a 3-year, $12.5 million deal to at least bring in some depth and competition for that offensive line that seems to be going through a massive rework. Richie Incognito, I believe, is probably going to be the only person from that line starting next season. So interesting to see what the Raiders do with all that. I'm glad to see that they're actually looking to address that position of need now, because it went from not being a position of need to being a position of need for the team. Now, as we continue on with the money conversation, first things first, COVID fines. The NFL was not joking around with this stuff. The Raiders were fined $800,000 and a 6th-round pick from the NFL over violations this past season. However, the Raiders were able to appeal the 6th-round pick and able to keep that for themselves. But on top of that, the Saints, on that continuation of money conversation, were fined $700,000. That's a lot of money. $700,000 and a 6th-round pick. They will not be getting that back. It doesn't seem like they have appealed for that. The Bucs were also fined $500K for their Week 9 celebration after defeating the Bucs. And the Saints and Raiders have given the NFL upwards of over $1 million, honestly, with these numbers here. I mean, just talk about money being thrown around. Fines left and right. The Saints and Raiders both got fined $250K for mask violations in the game that they played against each other in week 2. The coaches individually were fined $100K. So a lot of money from those two organizations going back to the NFL, all because they couldn't handle a few simple rules during Monday Night Football all the way back in week 2 of the season, and just from a handful of other violations as well. So a lot of money being thrown around for all those teams. Hopefully they can figure out a way to recoup all that money, but that is a fat sum of money going right back to the NFL. To go off some bigger news that came from today, earlier on this morning, the NFL draft has been officially announced to be going on in Cleveland the April 29th to May 1st. So this is some really big news because a lot of people were unsure as to what was going to be going on with the draft this year, whether it was going to be virtual again, if it was going to be held in person. From what I was reading, select numbers of fans, prospects, and media crew will be on site for the event. It's going to be 3 days like it normally is. Free events for fans will be available. Fans will be required to wear face masks and adhere to any physical distancing rules that are going to be set up by the state when the draft does roll around. And roughly what are we looking at here? About like a month and a week, a month and 2 weeks, something like that. On top of that, it will be held in 3 locations. It'll be at First Energy Stadium. It'll also be presented at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Great Lakes Science Center. So massive venue for the NFL draft. A lot of people weren't really sure what was going to be going on with all that. So exciting to see that this is how the NFL has decided to go, and almost kind of like a spark for hope and moving in towards the future as we kind of return to normalcy from the last year that we have had in the United States and all over the entire world. On top of that, fans will be selected by teams to be a part of what they're calling inner circles, which will allow them to serve as draft team ambassadors for their specific teams that they choose. They must be vaccinated for it. And on top of that, the NFL is bringing back their draft experience, which is like an interactive theme park, which allows you to kind of experience different facets of working your way into the NFL type deal. It will be there all 3 days. However, it'll be reservation based as opposed to just kind of a come and go type deal where it's like first come, first serve, as it has been in years past. So exciting that the NFL draft is going to be basically just a normal event in a way. Obviously, as normal will be allowed right now, but in like the year that we've had, this is great. It gives you a real opportunity to just kind of see that we're working our way back to normalcy, and that's really exciting to see. I'm excited for the draft. Pro days are going on. Obviously, the combine was canceled, so we're getting pro days on the NFL Network. There's usually like one about every day, every other day, as we work our way into it. As we get closer and closer to the draft, we will be starting to focus more on the prospects that we have to look at. I've obviously been quoted on here many times saying that I didn't really want to focus on like mock drafts and things like that when we're still over 2 months away and people are putting mock draft 1.0s in right after the Super Bowl's over. I mean, free agency is a massive piece for teams to put together their new unit for the following season. Why are we making mock drafts when we're literally 2.5, 3 months out from the actual draft itself and we still haven't even gone through free agency? We don't even know who's been cut. It's never made sense to me. I don't know. I just think they're ridiculous. So exciting to hear about the draft. Exciting that it's going to be an in-person event. I'm looking forward to seeing how that ends up working out. Now, as far as TV deals go, this was massive news this past weekend. The NFL has announced a roughly $113 billion just mega media deal, essentially, with Amazon, CBS, ESPN, Fox, NBC. Lots of money being thrown around for rights to air these games on Sundays, the Super Bowl, the playoffs, preseason game, things like that. The real big thing that kind of came out of this was Amazon claiming exclusive rights to Thursday night games. So now Thursday night games will be aired exclusively on the internet as opposed to on cable television. This is signs of things I feel moving forward, and moving more into that digital age. I'm somebody who I spend a lot of my watching time not on cable and more on the internet myself. A lot of people I saw that were voicing concerns over poor internet connections, things like that. the way I see it is this is kind of how things are moving. I firmly believe that cable's kind of on its way out. It's just kind of it's an old style system. As things evolve, things start to change, just like house phones. Nobody really has a house phone anymore. And if you do have a house phone, no offense to you, but that's kind of something that's kind of, we've moved past and progressed from, where now everyone just has their own mobile device. So as, technology continues to progress forward, it seems like internet's going to slowly and surely become more of like an all access, available to everyone type deal. And this just kind of, it makes sense. I think they dropped in roughly like $1 billion to be able to do this. So Amazon really staked a claim as, we want these Thursday night games, and they're trying to really push things forward in that element. So it's interesting to see something so massive like the NFL giving up an entire night of football over to the digital side of things. I'm excited to see how that ends up working out for them. As far as like splits for Super Bowl games and stuff goes, ESPN, along with ABC, their affiliate, they're going to be getting about 2 games in that 10-year span from 2023 to 2033, while CBS, Fox, and NBC will be getting 3 Super Bowls apiece as you go through that. So a lot of money just being thrown around. The one topic of conversation that I personally pulled myself after this announcement was the fact that I'm curious as to what the NFL is going to do with Sunday Ticket. That is something that, in my opinion, needs to go from DirecTV. DirecTV is on its way to bankruptcy, well on its way to bankruptcy. It's just satellite TV is not the way to go. It's not reliable, and DirecTV sucks. And that's just my opinion. Sorry DirecTV if anyone catches wind of this, but I don't like it. I never thought it was good for the couple of months that I did have it. It just constant connection issues. Never really made sense to me why the NFL dished it out to DirecTV. Maybe it was just because of the time period back in 2015. Everything hadn't been as pushed digitally as it is now. But going forward, their deal, I believe, ends until the 2022 season. So you have to believe that something is going to be done with Sunday Ticket, because I'll go on record right now and say this. I would offer up a solid $200 a year, hell, maybe even $300 a year, to just be able to get Sunday Ticket on its own as a standalone streaming service, just like, Prime Video and all those other things, Netflix, Hulu, all that stuff. I would pay a flat rate for $200 to $300 a year for it if I could just watch whatever games I want. Or if they went an even more interesting route, like let's say they did something like a la carte, where, you could go AFC North, NFC South, the NFC West, and the AFC East. If you really wanted to pull it like that, where you could just pull the divisions, or if you really wanted to, dive into it and just go, team specific, or if you wanted to be able to do it as just, I love the AFC, my team's in the AFC, I want to know what's going on in the AFC as far as games go, because it pertains to my team more so than any of the NFC games. That is something that I think has real money potential for the NFL, and in a league where they're just trying to make as much money as possible. Why wouldn't they do something like that? Like, I understand, you could just bundle it all in and throw it in as a $200, $300 package, but just the temptation of being to a la carte and only get specific teams that you want to see, it would work, and you'd probably get more subscribers out of it as well. So that's something I would like to see the NFL kind of go with. The rumor has it that ESPN's interested. I've been really digging in deep to this to see how serious it was, because with ESPN Plus, there's a really big opportunity for them to kind of tie it into ESPN Plus in some shape or form. That's something I would be all for. I have ESPN Plus myself. It's super cheap. It's it's less than Netflix and Hulu and all those other things. It's just like a little additional thing that I have on the side, so I can follow all the stories and whatnot and catch anything that they're providing on there. I think that would be a fantastic idea for Sunday Ticket. ESPN president Jimmy Pitaro, I was able to pull this quote out from an interview. He said himself specifically, "We've had exploratory conversations with the league. Sunday Ticket is an incredibly valuable product," which 100% it is. "When the league is ready, we are interested in having that conversation with them." So ESPN is definitely interested. The president himself said that they want to bring it in. I am all for it. And whether they decide to just roll it into ESPN Plus, or if they do their own standalone thing with like the idea that I said, the a la carte, where you can pick divisions, conference, team specific, however you want to do it, if you want to just bundle the whole league together, I'm all for Sunday Ticket getting pulled from DirecTV. DirecTV is not the place to go for that. And it bothers me so much that it's only available to college students without DirecTV. I would love, love, love to be able to get that for myself, but I'm not a college student. I would pay so much money to just be able to get the games that I want to watch, or just be able to watch all the games. The NFL, I know you guys are looking at it. Figure something out. ESPN Plus, make your own NFL streaming service. Make the NFL Network a legitimate network that we could use online to do something like that. Figure it out. I'm all for it, and I'm sure a lot of other people would hand over a lot of money for it. And that's the TV deal news. Sorry, I went on like a crazy rant there, but that's just something I would love to see. I don't know how you guys would feel about that. Fire in the comment section. Let me know, because I would just love to see Sunday Ticket become its own standalone thing or get bundled into something more accessible than DirecTV. As far as player news specific goes, a few things going on. Again, as I've been doing since this whole thing has come out, the Deshaun Watson stuff that's going on, we're in such an early stage that speculating, it's worthless. It's not worth the time. Don't feed into it. The media people are running with it because it's a story. It's gonna force you to click on their website and go to their page so they can pull in ad revenue. No one necessarily knows what's going on. I saw the text messages that came out. That does not look good. That's my opinion on that. Whether they're real or not, I don't know. I would assume they are. I could be wrong. Who knows? But I assume that they're real. Again, they did not look good. At this point, 10 lawsuits have been filed. The lawyer has been saying that there are even more women coming forward as well. And like I said about this piece on Thursday, I don't know who's right or wrong at this point. We're way too early into the stages of anything to even be able to consider who's in the right and who's in the wrong and what's actually going on here. I hope justice is served to whoever deserves it. And just best of luck to both sides in trying to prove their case, and hopefully the truth comes out. And that's all I have to say about that. But I do want to just bring it up because it is in the news of today. A big thing that I want to talk about that came out this past weekend, Russell Wilson. The news on Russell Wilson, pretty crazy. So the Bears came like this close to signing him, or to getting a trade done with the Seahawks to bring him in onto the team. At this point, it's come out, the Bears offered 3 first-rounders, a third-rounder, and 2 starters. So that's a lot of capital to be offering and giving up for their player, for their star player. So, for a star player, rather. The interesting thing for me was those 2 starters. And so I did a little bit of digging here. And apparently, according to Jason La Canfora, the Bears, or from his source from the Bears, claims that Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks were the 2 people thrown into the conversation of that trade rumor. That's interesting to me because Khalil Mack is a centerpiece of that defense, and they gave up a lot to bring him in. And I cannot believe that he was in the topic of conversation. Khalil Mack's a generational type of player, very, a monster on the D-line. And Akeem Hicks is no slouch himself. Another solid piece on the D-line. Both players good for, 8+ sacks in a season at this point. And so that's surprising to me. A little caveat that kind of came into the whole, breakdown of the deals, us outside of Seattle just deciding, we should maybe stick and try to fix the issue that we have with Russell Wilson, because he had come out and said on his own that he wanted to stay in Seattle, is that an issue in the trade could have been the dead money that was involved. And it seems like the dead money would have been roughly about $39 million for the Seahawks to take should they have traded Russell Wilson. Now, what's interesting to me is that's pre-June 1st of this year money. If the Seahawks decided to wait and hold off until post-draft, which granted does kind of kill value on the trade a little bit, because at this point, the teams that drafted quarterbacks will be kind of like, all right, we have our new guy, we want to roll with this guy. But there's always going to be a team or like 4 in the league that need a quarterback that would give up a lot for him. The other thing you have to think about is with this draft, there's a couple of teams that have massive amounts of capital with this draft and next year's draft combined. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you wait. But post June 1st, the dead cap hits only $13 million. So you break that out over 2 years, you're looking at about 6.5 per year. Is Russell Wilson still able to move from Seattle? I would say it's unlikely. It's possible. I don't see it happening, But 13 million as opposed to 39 million, that's a 26 million drop in cap space. So if cap did have any factor in that, I would be curious to see if that's something they explore later on in the offseason, or if it's just one of those things where they're going to let it roll into next offseason. And with that cap number being so low, that's kind of like the out year for Russell Wilson's contract. Maybe Russell Wilson moves on next year. But that's some interesting numbers and interesting stuff to think about. I still can't believe the Bears were willing to offer up so much, especially if it really was Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks in that trade. I mean, those are some really good players, and you're giving up a lot of draft capital. That's a lot. Like, I understand it's Russell Wilson, at this point you can argue, top 5 quarterback. So, and some people would argue even top 3. I mean, I understand it's Russell Wilson, but geez, that's so much draft capital. And like a player like Khalil Mack, like, my God. As far as the last piece of player news that I have goes, this is a story I just want to touch on real quick because I'm very intrigued by the whole thing. Offensive lineman Isaiah Wilson was just released by the Dolphins, I believe yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. This has been something of this is a weird situation. So he was drafted in the first round last year by the Titans. And the trouble just basically started right away, going into the preseason, the preseason or whatever it was that, pre-actual season, because there wasn't a real preseason this year, but just going into everything, they were having issues with him not showing up and stuff like that. He ended up being, by the time like week 14 rolled around, he was completely, NFI list, non-participant. He had personal issues he needed to work through, things like that. And he was gone for the rest of the season. Then on top of that, they roll into the offseason. They're trying to work with him. He's, doesn't want to hear it from the Titans. He said he was done playing for them. He gets traded to the Dolphins, and it seemed at first like it was okay, maybe he didn't want to be in the Titans kind of scenario, but then it's become more of like okay, is there something up? Is it football? Is he just not interested in football anymore? As somebody who prior to this show, I was doing a normal talk show, just interviewing people. We talked a lot about mental health and things like that in some of my episodes, and I'm still an advocate for it now. Is just mental health awareness. If there is something going on with the Isaiah Wilson situation, I just strongly urge, whoever's around him, his support, family, friends, things like that, just reach out to him. Make sure he's okay. He's given up a lot. Somebody that's a first round pick. If it really is just him not giving not a care in the world about football anymore, great. That is like best case scenario. He just doesn't care about football anymore. Doesn't want to be a part of it. Great. If there's anything else beyond that, just talk to him, be there for him. Push him in the correct direction, because if it's anything that has to do with mental health, that is such a touchy subject for a lot of people, and it's hard for some people to, push themselves in the right direction. And I just strongly urge whoever's around him to check on him, make sure he's in a good place, and just be there for him in what is a wild time, because, you went from being a first round draft pick, top of the world in the NFL standards, to you're not even in the league 1 year later. So just a real weird situation, in my opinion. I wish him the best. I hope the best for him and whatever he does beyond football, because at the end of the day, it is just a game. It is not everything in the world. Beyond that, on the topic of college, people just coming out of college, things like that, pro days are going on. Alabama is headlining the pro days tomorrow. They're first of 2. They're the only school that has 2 pro days today. Not today, but this offseason, rather. This offseason. The first one is going to be tomorrow at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the 23rd. So you can catch that on the NFL Network. It's during their Path to the Draft special thing that they got going on, which they're highlighting essentially the biggest schools with the most prospects and things like that with the biggest names. If you want to check them out and see what's going on there. The following day, the 24th, USC will be having their pro day at 8 p.m. Eastern time, or aired rather at 8 p.m. Eastern time on March 24th. Again, part of the Path to the Draft. I'm stumbling over my words here. Path to the Draft special that they have going on the NFL Network there. So if you're interested in seeing some of those bigger name colleges with the big name players that are coming out from this year's draft class, good opportunity there with Alabama in their first showing. Alabama has a second one on the 30th as well. So if you're an Alabama person, mark that date on your calendar. The 30th is the second day you'll be able to catch that. In final news to wrap up, FCF Finals, fan-controlled football. For those of you that are a fan of that and maybe have been following along with me as I've reported on them since they started back in week 1 a few weeks ago, The finals, the People's Championship, was played for this past Saturday in a wild shootout of a game. 46-40 was the final score. At this point on the show, I am 0-4 in my game predictions. So, and this is the second time now that I have made a prediction, and not a second time now, but this is the second time I've made a prediction on somebody I was very confident in winning, and just like it completely, and on top of that, it hurts because it was on the last play of the game. So to give you some context for the ending, the game came down to literally the wire. The Wild Aces and the Glacier Boys were knotted up 40-40, literally last couple of seconds of the game. QB Edward Crouch was able to take a 2-yard scramble into the end zone as time expired to win the game for the Wild Aces. So now, to give you guys some understanding, I was actually going to pick the Wild Aces to win. When I was putting together my predictions on Thursday for the show, I did pick the Wild Aces initially. And then right before my show started, I thought to myself, all right, I gave the Glacier Boys literally no credit, and I against the Beasts, and I said no, and they completely blew out the Beasts, and I panicked and was like, what if that happens again? So I switched to picking the Glacier Boys. So my gut was telling me Wild Aces, but my pick was wrong. So I'm now 0-4 in decisions for game predictions here. I cannot wait for the regular season of the NFL to start and see how long it takes me to predict some games correctly. I cannot believe, honestly, it's very fitting that I start out 0-4 in predictions there. But a big game nonetheless, 46-40 for the Wild Aces. They totaled 288 yards of offense altogether. 166 of that were rushing. The ground game was led by Ladarius Galloway. He had 75 yards off of 3 touchdowns altogether. So big day for the running game for the Wild Aces. They were able to lock up that People's Championship win and wrap up the very first season of the fan-controlled football league. I'm curious to see where this all goes forward now, because it was a short season. They were supposed to have 8 teams. They wound up with 4, and I feel like a lot of that had to do with the global situation from the last year. So now, with it being just 6 weeks altogether, the way it sounded, because they were like season 1, the way that sounded to me and the way I took that, and maybe I am wrong with this, is that it was going to be maybe just a season type thing as opposed to like a yearly type thing. It's like by seasons. If that's the case, I'm interested to see how it goes. Their game times were so late in the day that whether they decide to compete during the NFL season and like when college football is going on, I don't know how their viewership will be affected, especially because it's on Twitch and they're not necessarily targeting just football fans. It has a different target audience of younger viewers. You're pulling in a real large gaming audience from the Twitch factor. So I'm curious to see if this is it for them until next year around this time. I don't think that that's a good idea. I would love to see that. I mean, they only played a 6-week season. They could run a season 2 at some point during this offseason for the NFL and college before the next season even starts. If they wanted to, give the players a month or 2 off and then roll it back again, they could do that before the NFL and preseason even gets rolling again. So I'm curious to see where it ends up going, but nonetheless, a fantastic finish for what was a very strange but unique and also exciting kind of thing to watch. I look forward to seeing where they go with this. I hope they continue on with it. I hope this is not like a one and done, or 2 and done type of league where they barely get through anything. We've seen what's happened with like the XFL and the Alliance, the American Alliance Conference Football or whatever it was called. I don't know, the AAFF or the ACF. I don't know what it was, but at this point, I just really hope that, this is something that can stick around. It's such a different option from regular football that I think it does have its own place in the world and that it should be around for more than just a year or 2. But other than that, that's pretty much it for the show. That wraps up everything that I had to share with you guys today. As always, my name is Ethan Hursadulu. I appreciate you all for joining me. Remember to check out our show's social pages, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just kidding, not Instagram. I'm working on the Instagram page. I had to make a couple changes to something. It will be up soon. So Facebook and Twitter for now. I'm pretty active on the Facebook page with all the news and things like that. Twitter, I'm slowly becoming more and more active on. So if you want to talk to me up on there, I am on there as well. And I do have a personal Instagram page, which is just me. So if you want to find me on there, it's literally my first and last name that pops up at the beginning of the show. You can find that there on Instagram. But without further ado, enjoy the rest of your Monday, everybody. My name is Ethan. Thank you all for watching.